And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore. We never sit out. We're your hosts, MD and CD. Today, we're recapping week 10. Look, it was a pretty crazy week. All right, college football playoff implications. Lots of teams dropping like flies in their conference games against inferior opponents. I mean, this week there were 5 teams that were 10-point underdogs that lost. An undefeated Iowa State team that lost. A first place Texas A&M team that lost. A first place in the ACC Clemson team that lost. Yeah, you had a lot of stuff go down. All right, even Georgia had trouble with Florida. Look, we'll get to these games, but first, if you like the content, make sure you like the video. It's a simple rule that we have here. If this is your first time hopping in, I would encourage you to stick around a little bit. If you like it, maybe subscribe, and that'll encourage you to stick around as we are previewing, recapping weeks. As things are just going to get crazy. Your first college football playoff rankings come out on Tuesday. So that's definitely a big deal. We're in that kind of season. We're in November right now. So the season is winding down. CD, I mean, this is a pretty good slate of football. Am I crazy that we just watched?
No, I thought I was pretty impressed. Obviously, we talked about it as being, a week that could, be pretty fruitful for some teams, but also, take away for others. Like we talk about, November giveth and November taketh, and that's what it did for some teams there. Like you said, it was interesting that 4 teams in the Power Four, one from each conference, that were undefeated in conference play, all went down this weekend. It is fantastic. It is only the first week in November, only week 10, and we still got 4 more weeks to go, right? If I'm not mistaken, and a lot of football left to be played. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
Absolutely. And for the agenda today, we're gonna get into some games that we didn't necessarily preview. All right, heading into this weekend, so we'll get to talk about those games. We'll recap our dirty dogs, which once again, the 10-point underdogs that CD and I are calling out on these shows, they're in trouble. All right, if you're on the list and you're a dirty dog, or you're not the dirty dog, you're the receiving end of it, you're in trouble. All right. And we'll also talk about our best bets, which did not do so well. And I am continuing to schneid. Although I am up on the season, I continue to schneid. As if so, we're up on the season. But I continue to slide. So we'll get into all that stuff. I guess first things first, we'll recap some of these games that we didn't really necessarily preview. Let's talk Duke Miami. I mean, fourth quarter, Cam Ward is, one of the best football players I've ever seen. All right, he threw that interception. That was not good. Okay, but he just continues to elevate his play in the fourth quarter. I mean, they were down, was it 28 to 17?
Yep.
28-17, and they covered minus 21 in the fourth quarter. That is unbelievable. Yeah, they outscored Duke in the second half 36 to 10.
36-10 is the correct. Yep.
So what an effort by Cam Ward and the Duke team. Good effort by them, by the way. And I thought about putting Miami, taking them to, cover at home here against Duke because I really don't believe in this Duke team moving forward. But I will say I was very impressed with that first half performance by them. They definitely stuck their noses in there and they played a valiant effort on defense early in the game. I have no complaints to either team. I like the way that Miami responded in the second half, and I also like the fight that Duke gave as well. So I'm not looking at like, oh, this team is worse now, this team's better now. Like I'm like, all right, these teams were. It's probably the final score probably played out the way that it should have, but I mean, giving up 31 points to Duke is not good. So the Miami defense continues to struggle, and they continue to rely on Cam Ward to surge in the second half. I guess if you were to say that there's an issue, that would probably be the underlying issue of Miami. But otherwise, the offense got it done when they needed to get it done.
They're so explosive, and they can just get you in an instant there, especially when they need to. You saw it in the Louisville game a couple weeks ago. You saw it here again today. Yeah, Duke at one point had a 63.6% chance to win. I mean, that's just all metrics. It's not really super accurate, but that tells you exactly how dominant Miami was in the third and fourth quarter once they really took over. Like you said, the only concerning part is that defense. There was a good 20, 22 minutes of game time where they struggled for sure, and Duke really moved the football there. And you got to give Duke a ton of credit for that too, but it's also concerning because if you do get a team as talented as Miami, if not more talented, and an offense that can really take advantage of you as well as a defense, that could potentially give you some problems. It could be worrisome for sure. But their schedule, I don't know if it really dictates teams that are going to be super super dangerous that fit that mold in terms of the talent and the threshold that you need to have to stop Cam Ward when he is playing well. But he is playing like a Heisman Trophy winner right now. I mean, he is right up there with my ballot. I'm going to wait until the end of the season to really make my decision there. But he is fantastic and a lot of fun to watch there for Miami. I guess if I want to pick one here, I'll go to the Big 12 here in Kansas State. Going on the road at Houston and losing there. I know it was weird weather. I get that. And I know it wasn't ideal, but you were up, what, 6 points at halftime there, right? 16-10. And so it was just frustrating, I think, for Kansas State to just play an offense that, really only had one thing going. And I know Zion Chris was 11 for 11. I get that. That's super impressive. But it was really just the running game and some turnovers and some long explosive plays. Like, it was just not like Houston has a very, very small path of window to win against teams that are more talented than them. And they found it. And so I got to give them a ton of credit. Got to give the coaching staff, new coaching staff, a ton of credit. They are 4-5 right now, 3-3 in conference after a disastrous start to the season, right? And they're
Crazy.
battling right now. They got a chance to make a bowl game. They absolutely do with Arizona and Baylor and BYU. Obviously, those last two might be tougher than potentially you thought coming into the season, but yeah, they absolutely have a chance to make a bowl game. I love it. I'm happy for this coaching staff, happy for them, and for Kansas State, it's crippling because on the same weekend that Iowa State loses, and you put yourself in a potential driver's seat to have a chance, right, to make the playoffs, to make the Big 12 championship game, you lost, and now you're tiebreaker over Colorado. You're not. That doesn't matter anymore because you have more losses than they do.
Yeah, Colorado. Uh, they don't control their own destiny, but they're in it, dude. They play a Texas Tech team on the road, which could be interesting, could be tough. Colorado also plays a Utah team at home that's not looking that good. Kansas team on the road that hasn't looked good, and Oklahoma State team that looks pretty not good. Colorado's in this, man. Colorado's in this, and I don't know what these tiebreakers are going to be. I guess it's probably wins over common opponents, if I had to guess. And then Iowa State plays Kansas State, that last weekend of the season. So the Big 12's up for grabs right now. BYU holds the driver's seat there, but yeah, you're looking at if BYU doesn't win the Big 12 at this point, my belief is that, well, I guess Iowa State only has one loss, but there are a lot of bid stealing potential in the college football playoffs when it comes to the Big 12 as a result of some of these losses. I mean, that was a bad loss for Kansas State. That is their second loss of the season. So I want to go over to the ACC. I want to talk about a Virginia Tech team. Not pulling it out there against Syracuse on the road. Kyron Drones not playing. Basil Tuden not playing. Honestly, I thought Colin Schlee played pretty well for what you brought him in to do, and that we kind of talked about an underrated backup quarterback yet in the portal was Colin Schlee because of the fit that he has there at Virginia Tech and the way that he wants to use his legs and athleticism. Um, and he did do that against Syracuse, but Syracuse gets the job done after coming off a pretty horrendous game versus Pitt the week before. So credit to Syracuse getting off the mat. Credit Virginia Tech for fighting with one of the best running backs in that entire conference being out, and then also your quarterback being out as well. So yeah, I'm just going to credit. Uh, I guess, or did Tootin get hurt? That's what it was, right? He got hurt early in the game.
I Let me double check here. I don't
He
think
only
so.
had
I
he only
thought
had
he was ruled out.
says he got one carry, but
Regardless, so majority of the game he was not out there. Yeah, and like you said, Conley I thought played okay. To me, it was you saw Syracuse last week turn the ball over a bunch, and Pitt really capitalized on it, and Virginia Tech could not, especially in that first half. You had two turnovers and 0 points off those turnovers, and then you have a fumble that led to a touchdown for Syracuse and helped them come back in the ball game. You had a chance to win that football game on the road there, stay alive in the conference race, which by the way, really opened up with Clemson losing, and you play Clemson next week at home, and so you really had a chance to put your stamp on a potential right ACC run here in November, and you don't get it done. I get it. You without a couple of your best players on offense. I get that. I do. It sucks, obviously, but you had a chance to win this game. I know a lot's being made right now about Brent Pry and his one score losses and his one score game record right now at Virginia Tech. I mean, I'm not going to blame him for too much of that because I know it was a pretty big rebuild there for a couple years, and obviously last year started the turnaround as well as this year. But again, this is one you have to have as for Syracuse. You're going bowling. You're going bowling in year one under Fran Brown. That's awesome, and you still have some games down the stretch where you can add to that, and you can potentially get into a pretty good bowl game, which is awesome. That was the goal I think this year, even with that good schedule you had. That was the goal, and congrats to you guys. You're looking pretty good outside of a fluky game against Stanford, right? And outside of again a fluky game against Pitt with all those turnovers, those pick sixes. Syracuse played good football, and they've won a lot of games, and that's something you got to hang your hat on this year if you're Syracuse.
Yeah, well, I
I,
mean, I don't know it's your turn to pick a game, but I do want to throw Indiana in there at some
yep,
point during this conversation because they are so good, man. And I know people want to point at, oh, who have they played? They don't have any ranked wins. Screw ranked wins. They're murdering teams. They are absolutely taking them behind the woodshed and putting them down. It is it is unbelievable right now. And they do play a game against Ohio State. But I just want to say, they lose that game to Ohio State, and you look at their resume. I'm afraid that people are going to look at their resume and be like, yeah, it's not good enough to make the college football playoffs. And their name's Indiana, right? Which is different than having a name like Michigan next to you, or Ohio State, or Alabama, or Texas, or Georgia, whatever. It's different. I just would be very disappointed if the committee didn't look at the quality of how they won in these games and handled business. I would say that their resume competes with a lot of teams if you look at, how they've done it in these games.
absolutely, and I think eye test is going to be a big deal against Ohio State, especially if they do beat Michigan this week, right? And they get their bye week, they get healthy. If they feel like they somewhat belong in that game, I think they absolutely deserve to have a conversation to be put in there. I think, and I don't put too much stock into the first week of the playoffs and the selection committee and the rankings because obviously we saw last year it changed so much. It fluctuated so much up and down one week to next week. It really changed. So, it's not going to be the end of the world here, but I am curious to see where Indiana starts because I hope that they give them credit for all of their wins. They give them credit for all of how they've looked, like you said, their eye test. Yeah, I mean they dominated Michigan State. Michigan State went up 10-0, and then they went on a tear. It was good to see Curtis Rourke back and healthy. He looked good and efficient, especially as he got going in the football game. They are a complete football team right now, and they're a complete football team. Defensively, they get after it in that front seven. I think they're going to give the Big Ten a lot of problems this year, as they already have, right? But down the stretch, you've got Michigan, Ohio State, and then your rival Purdue. Damn it, man. Why not? Why not? Indeed. I'll stay in the Big Ten here. A little bit disappointing. Other side of it, right? We'll talk about USC and Washington, right? Good win for Washington and Jed Fish there. They are close to making a bowl game, right? They're 5-4 there on the hunt. USC, on the other hand, is in danger of missing a bowl game. They have too many losses right now where they just teams that you should beat and you probably should beat games where you play pretty well enough to win and you just don't win them. And it has been a pretty big skid here since that Minnesota loss. You have one win against Rutgers at home against the Rutgers team that's struggling as well. I I don't know because I've been a guy defending Lincoln Riley. I've been a guy saying wait, wait, wait. He's got a lot of work to do there. Even though he's been there for a couple years, even though they have had success in the Pac-12, it felt like a rebuild year in his year three. But this is concerning. You've taken a step back. Clearly, you have a lot of talent on this roster. The numbers look great. It's just what happens. It's interceptions. Miller Moss, who has been, I think, pretty good. Not the problem all year long. He had a couple interceptions, and it just hurts you. It just hurts you. Led to 10 points from Washington. It took away a potential chance you had early in the game to get a score. So yeah, it's it's not ideal right now for USC. I know fans are furious as they should be. You had a chance to win the football game. By the way, it was what, first and 10 at the 20 in the red zone there with 30 seconds to go, and you just go incomplete, incomplete, incomplete. Yeah, it's brutal. It is brutal right now for USC.
Yeah, if you want to speak of Big Ten fan bases that are not happy, let's talk about Nebraska, UCLA. I mean, holy cow. Ethan Garbers, last couple weeks, he's looked pretty decent, man. He's looked pretty decent. UCLA kind of looking like this second half of the season, they can kind of string together some wins. They probably won't make a bowl game, but I mean, stringing together some of these wins right now, the way that they are, and you carry some of that momentum into next year, and USC continues to, do their thing. I mean, I don't know. I was pretty critical of the Deshaun Foster hiring. I know you were a little bit higher on it than I was, but and obviously it's year one, so you have no idea if it's going to work out or not for another couple of years. But they're playing all right football. On the other side of that, Dylan Raiola also goes down. I don't know his status moving forward. As in terms of his health at that quarterback position. I don't know that they're going to win a lot of football games without him. I think Harburg's like okay, but you've already seen the Harburg experiment, and it was not very pretty the year before. So Nebraska, that was a chance for them to make a bowl game. That would have been their sixth win of the season. And now you're looking at a Nebraska team that's 5-4 with a remaining schedule that includes USC, Wisconsin, and at Iowa. There's a chance that after starting the season 5-1, that you could miss a bowl game.
That would
Which
be the
Nebraska
cherry on
fans,
top.
that is just, I'm sorry, Nebraska fans, but that is something that I'm sure you're accustomed to or now steadily preparing for because that's bad. You can definitely beat USC on the road, but again, I don't know the status of Dylan Raiola's health. I don't. It just,
It's big hits.
yeah, you ran the ball pretty decently, but just UCLA, man, they found a way in this one, man. They found a way, and they got up early, and they really from front to start. UCLA won this football game.
No, definitely. And honestly, after getting blown out in week one at home against Indiana, which at the time looked a lot different than it does right now, they've been playing okay football. They gave LSU some problems. They didn't get totally dominated by Oregon. They gave Penn State, honestly, a lot of issues there on the road there in Happy Valley. They gave Minnesota all they could handle there until the end. And then obviously getting two wins here on the road, going across the country a couple times against Rutgers and Nebraska. And now they finished the rest of their season. Right, we talked about them being a team that has traveled a ton, and now they get to stay on the Pacific time zone. Their only away game is Washington up in Seattle. They're not too bad of a flight from LA to Seattle. Yeah, I mean, listen, I've got a under 4.5 ticket for UCLA this year. Listen, I'm more on the wait and see of Deshaun Foster, right? Like wait to see what happens. I know there's a lot to do there. I didn't quite think I'd see it in year one, but listen, I've been impressed as of late there, and good for them. Good for them. Speaking of Big Ten teams that are disappointing and maybe in danger of missing a bowl game, Wisconsin right now getting absolutely dominated by Iowa. Iowa's all of a sudden their new look offense with Brendan Sullivan in there, who obviously didn't light the world up, but he was efficient. He runs the ball well, right? Him and Caleb Johnson give them a nice dimension to that offense there. And if you're running the ball for 330 yards at home, you are going to have a ton of success. And that is Iowa's bread and butter. Braden Locke, like we talked about, good for his interception or two in a game. And he did. As for Wisconsin right now, it is tough. It is tough sledding here because there was some hype coming in season. I know you had a tough schedule. You had a couple opponents that you thought you could get some wins on. You played Penn State pretty tough. And yeah, it just didn't happen. It's not happening right now. You get Oregon, which does not get much easier after your bye week, and then
Nope.
at Nebraska, and then rival Minnesota for the Axe at home there in Madison the day after Thanksgiving. Yeah, the serious danger of missing a bowl game. It's going to be either potentially that winner of the Nebraska game. The winner probably goes to a bowl game, and the other one probably does not. And that's really, really downing considering how these teams at one point were playing through the season, right? For Nebraska, like you said, it was early in the season, 5-1, and for Wisconsin, it was that middle stretch against a couple of the bottom of the Big Ten right now in Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern. But man, oh man, tough, tough, tough in the Big Ten West.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's a lot of teams, and we'll get to them. When we come to our best bets and some of our previews, some teams that definitely disappointed. There's just a lot of disappointment all around this week. I do want to talk just quickly. Rice Navy first game out of the you fire your head coach. Okay, Mike Bloomgren over at Rice. And maybe Navy's broken now. Maybe Notre Dame just shattered them. And I talked about that with you. I'm like, oh man, this was one of the 5 teams that won as 10-point underdogs this week. Rice came out, dominated early, and just never let up. Navy looked not good. And all of a sudden, what does Notre Dame's resume look like? Texas A&M loses, and we'll get to that. Navy kind of gets pounded by Rice. What is Notre Dame's resume really looking like right now? And I think that's a valid question to ask. And when these rankings come out on Tuesday night, I'm very, very interested to see where they slot Notre Dame, because as a team that's not in the conference, they have to make an at-large bid right there. And so their resume is more important to them than it is to really any other team. So it'll be interesting. But I just wanted to point that out. I didn't watch that game, but Rice pounding Navy. I mean, talk about not chewing your food right there, and just yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. Army still looks good. These days we'll talk about that. The best bets, but I mean they won with the backup quarterback, so they still might be a decent team on Notre Dame's resume that's left. But USC doesn't look good. Michigan, there's a lot of crazy stuff right now over there on Notre Dame's schedule. But
Yeah, I mean, that Louisville getting a win there, that's big for their. And to be honest, I'm looking at their schedule right now.
that is true.
I'm not gonna count Georgia Tech with a backup quarterback, right? Their 2 best wins right now are Louisville and Miami of Ohio. Oh, and Texas A&M. I'm sorry, Texas A&M, well, of course. But Miami
Yeah.
of Ohio is probably their 3rd best win right now. That's not ideal, like you said. It's very interesting to see where they get slotted. It was good to see EJ Warner and Rice, looking good there. Obviously, they've had a tough season, right? I know the expectations. I know it's a hard place to win there, but they thought maybe they'd be able to compete there in the American. They haven't so far. That was a big win. Happy for them to get that done. I'm going to go the SEC here, and in my opinion, the least impressive team in the top 10 is Tennessee right now. Tennessee, I mean, since North Carolina State, they have not looked like themselves. It has been slow start after slow start after slow start in these football games, and Kentucky was just not good enough offensively to make them pay at all. Dylan Sampson finally got going on the ground. I mean, it looked better at the end, but they were down again at halftime. I mean, how many times
Yep.
are you going to be struggling and limping, out of these football games and trying to figure out? You got Georgia on the road in a couple weeks there, and then Vanderbilt. Damn it, dare I say Vanderbilt on the road at the end of the year? Tennessee is a team that is in the driver's seat to make the playoffs, but you have to be able to be playing better than you are right now. To me, the eye test tells me you are not a top 12 team. I know your defense is playing well. I get that, but at some point, I want to see some kind of consistency offensively, some kind of urgency in these games. Am I crazy for saying that? And for Kentucky, man, I mean, yeah, it's really
You're
rough
probably
out.
not making a bowl game.
Yeah.
that was yeah. You're done. You're packing it up. Getting next year.
Well, maybe
The
their APR,
Vandegrift
maybe their
the
APR.
Vandegrift experiment didn't work the way that I thought it would. Your defense has been good, but not exactly as good as I thought it would be. Still slightly underwhelming on the year, but they got a whole mess of problems right there. And Mark Stoops is going to continue to get absolutely pounded by the media. And look, I guess we'll wait to see the rest of the season how it plays out for Kentucky. But I'm not like necessarily on the Stoops hate train like a lot of people are. But yeah, it's concerning for both those teams. Neither of those teams look great. And Tennessee, like you said, playing Georgia, playing Vanderbilt, it's not easy sledding the rest of the way. And you already got an SEC loss. You control your own destiny at this point. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal to look good the rest of the way out here. Last thing I want to talk about before we just get in stuff, I got to push my Ashton Genty. Got to get the narrative that he's the best player in college football out. He's once again 150 yards. I know you. If you watch that first half, you're like, "Well, that was not very impressive." Okay, but he got it going in the second half. I mean, once again, he got close to 40 touches. With a freaking brace on his elbow because he hyperextended it last week, and still looked really good and helped Maddox Madsen look very effective and efficient in the play action game once again. So, and people are going to look at that and be like, oh, he didn't. But the headlines are always like, Genti didn't play up to his standard, 180 total yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, what? What are you, come on. Like, he's a damn good football player. Now, I guess I understand that the Cam Ward stuff, I mean, he's looked really good. And Dylan Gabriel, I don't know, he's winning football games. I don't know. I just still think Ashton Genti right now is the best player in the country. And there's not much you can change my mind about, because people are like, oh, they're doing it against, like, oh, and Derrick Henry did it against SEC schools. It's like, yeah, he did. He did really good. He also had 40 touches against those teams. And but then when he played against, Charleston Southern, 52 yards, when he like just forgetting what it was.
It's also different year over year too. Like it's a lot different in my opinion. You can't be comparing the two. And by the way, Genti statistically is still blowing out, a lot of these running backs out of the water there. I do want to make the point here that we are entering a territory, especially with Iowa State losing, that there's a real possibility that Boise State gets a first round bye in the playoffs. If you don't know how the seeding works in college football, right? This year it's the 12 team playoffs, and you're going to have the four highest conference champion ranked teams, right, get a first round bye. And as the AP stands, I know we'll find a lot more on Tuesday about the playoff rankings and the college football playoff rankings. But as it stands right now, Boise State is 12th as the Mountain West. The highest ranked Big 12 team is at 9, and that's BYU. And there's a possibility that they lose the rest of their way out, or they lose in the conference
Conference
title game,
championship.
whatever it may be. Like, and they drop below Boise State, and they still make the playoffs because they are that large team or whatever it may be. But I think we should start actually considering the possibility that Boise State is going to have a bye. And that, to me, I do not think people are ready for that conversation. It's going to be a mess because I know my SEC fans, right? I know my Big Ten fans, and I know potentially ACC fans, depending which team it is. They're going to be upset because they have to play a first round game, and Boise State does not. Listen, you can't control that, man. You can't control that. I think it's awesome. I think it's fantastic. Although I would have loved to see Boise State hosting a playoff game. I think that would be crazy too. But regardless, I can't complain either way. But yeah, isn't that kind of cool? I just thought,
That is very cool. I guess I didn't really think about that until you just said that. But yeah, if Colorado comes out, sneaks out, and wins the Big 12 championship, I would. If both Colorado and Boise State go undefeated, the rest of the way, I would probably rank Boise State ahead of Colorado. Colorado might have some bigger wins, but I'm still under the belief that UNLV is a damn good football team.
Boise State
And
they'd have two UNLV wins potentially, right? Washington State, who by the way is ranked in the AP poll, which I don't know if I really believe, but regardless, it's still an okay quality win.
yep. So yeah, definitely an argument to be had there. Definitely an argument to be had there. Let's move over to our dirty dogs. Are you kidding me, man? Another week where we both hit one. Okay, we had one 2 weeks ago. And the winners this week, you were on it. Hawaii plus 440. Did I watch a lick of that game? No, but I'm sure you watched some of it or were following along with it. And they snuck out of there with a 1-point win against Fresno State, exactly the way you drew it up.
Huge, huge, huge win for me. I needed that because I did not have a great week and much else there. Very happy for Hawaii and Timmy Chang there. They got it going. Shager did some good stuff. They got out to an early lead, right, and then they came back and got a win there. It was awesome. 2 touchdowns the fourth quarter. Last second pass, right, by Shager to win it there on the road. Good stuff. Good stuff from Hawaii. Now, I didn't have the turnovers that I thought I'd have from Mikey Keene, but
Yeah.
turns out we didn't need it. But they played stifling defense, 31 passing attempts, 25 completions, but only 157 yards passing for Mikey Keene. And they stuffed the run, 21 attempts, 19 yards. I know stack yardage gets factored in there, but the running backs were not having much success either. And yeah, Nick Senecal is a monster for Hawaii. Number 3 there, the receiver, 12 receptions, 113 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And none of it was like this crazy chunk plays. It was just 10 yards a pop, 10 yards a pop, 10 yards a pop. First down, first down. It was awesome stuff for Hawaii. They have a chance to make a bowl game after the big win against Fresno State with their remaining schedule.
Which is awesome. Love those Rainbow Warriors. I mean, of course, was it? So there's always like a Hawaii Bowl, right? So they probably just like make them play in that or whatever. But it's all right. It's fine. A little home court advantage never hurt anyone in the bowl game. My dirty dog that I hit, my first pick, I took Louisville plus 325, and it continues the streak, which it is 3-0 when CD has a team on his best bets, and I put him on my dirty dogs. The dirty dog is straight up as 10-point underdogs in all three of those matchups. So we'll get into that game more because we did preview that game. But and then you also took San Diego State plus 1,300, which is insanely stinky. And early on, it wasn't looking bad, but Danny O'Neal just did not get it done at the quarterback spot. And, eventually Boise State pulled away there. And then my second dirty dog was Florida plus 600, which is looking really
That
interesting there
was
for a
pretty slow.
while until DJ Lagway got hurt and Georgia kind of pulled away there. And Carson Beck decided, I'm not going to throw it at Florida players, so yeah, Georgia's a whole nother conversation. They don't look great, particularly. Like, specifically, Carson Beck is just a guy that didn't do a lot of that, turning the ball over, just a season ago, is finding himself forcing footballs, missing throws. It hasn't been all pretty, right, for Carson Beck. And they do play some tough games remaining on the schedule. Like, they play good teams the rest of the way. Like, it is not an easy schedule for them. I know they handled their business against Texas, but they're not necessarily safe, right? It's not a just, hey, they're going to walk through the rest of the schedule. It's kind of a gauntlet the rest of the way. It's kind of a gauntlet. In the SEC, we've been seeing teams drop like flies, so no one's safe right now.
We talked about them having a ton of tough either neutral site or road games, and their last one is going to be Ole Miss next week. We'll definitely be previewing that football game. But yeah, I do like what you did here. I was worried about taking Florida, and if you told me, DJ Lago is also going to be getting hurt, which by the way, I hope he's okay because he is a tremendous football player. He's very talented. Sounds like a great kid as well. Tough to see a hamstring injury like that. That's going to be a brutal recovery. Obviously hoping he's okay, right? Because that's never fun to see at all, especially in a rivalry game. And Warner came in and listen, he did some fun things, it's frisky things, but it was not the same at all. And when Georgia can just sit back and kind of run after you, it was tough. And the turnovers, boom, 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 they just stacked up. But regardless, so give Billy Napier, give Florida a ton of credit early on. Now
Yes.
they had to run the ball. They ran the ball well. They had to convert on these turnovers early in the football game, a couple interceptions, and you have to turn those into touchdowns. And they only got 10 points off of them, 10 points off of 4 turnovers. The recipe for a game like that, an upset alert, that's kind of where it's at. Win some kind of edge there. And the turnovers, you did win, but you just couldn't capitalize on them. As for Florida, their schedule, just you want to talk about gauntlet as well.
Yeah.
Texas,
Well, Florida
LSU,
State all
and
of a
Ole
sudden.
Miss. Oh, I mean, you're probably gonna be favored in that game, but maybe a touchdown, even with your third string quarterback. But the making a bowl game, right? Like you're gonna have to really upset somebody, and we talked about that. It's like, yeah, you're gonna have to win a big game, and they haven't yet, but maybe they're due.
Yeah, so on the year, the Dirty Dogs are looking fantastic. We are 10-30 on the season, so riding around 25%, which is freaking awesome. We're hit plus 325s, plus 440s. It was a 600 a couple weeks ago. I mean, we're to be sitting at 25%. And if you were to follow these, right, and bet these, which we don't, and we don't advise that you do, but maybe I
Maybe we should
recreationally,
have.
maybe we should have. We are up, well, at least, yeah, 9.3 units on the year if you were to follow all of our Dirty Dogs. Um, Not to toot my own horn, but if you were to follow just my Dirty Dogs, you'd be up 19 units, which is wild. Yeah, I'm 8-12 on the year, but CD getting hot at the right time, which we love to see. So we're performing well over expectations, and love that. But where we're not performing, all right, in these expectations is our best bets. And for me, this is the 5th straight losing week for me. I'm still up 1.21 units on the year. I went 2-3 this week. And I'll get to my stuff before I get to your plays, and you can talk about them. South Carolina, Texas A&M under 45. I mean, South Carolina scores 44 points on their own, 500 total yards of offense. We'll get to that. That was frustrating to watch. Old Dominion minus 2.5 against App State. The week after, I take Old Dominion plus 600 to win the Sun Belt. Georgia Southern has a 21 point, 20-point fourth quarter comeback against South Alabama. Take the lead there, the sole control of the Sun Belt East Division. I believe it's the East Division. And then you just, 4 turnovers in App State's territory, and you lose by 8 points. You had a chance there. You were driving down at the end of the game. Colton Joseph, who I've talked highly about, and he was pretty effective as a passer for the most part. 3 fumbles and a pick. It's not great. Then you also had a turnover on downs in there somewhere else as well. It just was. It was a game that Old Dominion could have and should have absolutely won, but they did not. And I took -2.5, so that one hurt a lot. And then Army -22.5, my other loss. Uh, I'm not going to sweat that one. I mean, they won by 17 points, and they didn't have their starting quarterback, which we didn't find out about till an hour before kickoff. So I'm not crying about it. So whatever. Arizona State -2.5 was my winner. Was one of my winners. Mississippi State -17.5 was my other winner against UMass. So Arizona State looked really good against Oklahoma State. Mississippi State, Van Buren continues to look awesome, but they're actually able to run the ball a little bit there with Johnny Daniels. And yeah, Mississippi State looked good. That was a nice bounce back win for them. They definitely needed that. And Arizona State continues to look good, and Oklahoma State continues to look garbage. But yeah, so for me, I don't regret taking Old Dominion -2.5. I regret the South Carolina A&M one under 45. I'd probably look at that a little bit differently in hindsight. And then the Army one, I'm not going to be too hard on myself because I didn't know that Bryson Daly was going to be out, until like when we were recording this on Tuesday. On your side, you took Louisiana +4, which if you were watching the show before, you're like, oh, I didn't see that pick. It came out, the show came out after the game because it's on Tuesday. Well, you can follow us on Twitter at the Redshirt Sophomore, and we definitely posted that pick, and it definitely smacked. Unfortunately for CD, you're 0-4 the rest of the way. Coastal Carolina -4, lost straight up to Troy. Illinois +3, lost straight up to Minnesota. Auburn -6.5, lost straight up to Vanderbilt. And Clemson -10.5, lost straight up to Louisville. So what's your outlook here? What would you do differently? Do you just feel like I feel like a dummy for taking the South Carolina A&M under 45? Where are
Yeah,
you feeling about your picks?
and we'll talk more about Illinois and their game against Minnesota because we previewed that one and we'll recap it as well. And same thing with Clemson and Louisville. But I mean, I'm done betting on Auburn, right? Like that was ridiculous. What am I doing betting against Vanderbilt? That's my problem too. I'm 0-2 this year betting against them. And then Troy just explosive plays, running the ball well, 340 yards at home. Also, Devontae Ross is a monster. He had a big time catch there, which is crazy. And I know he's a guy you've been high on for a while, but I don't know. I mean, I just I thought I thought I got value with Auburn, and I didn't. Obviously, I thought I got value with Coastal, and I didn't. Obviously, and in Illinois, I felt good about that one as well. Same thing with Clemson. Yeah, it was just tough. I got to really reevaluate how I'm looking at the board here after a really really good weeks 4 through 7. Right, I've kind of tailored off here, and I'm down 0.34 units right now. So we're still battling. We're still in there, hanging in there, but ready to bounce back. But yeah, not ideal Saturday after going 1-0 to start the week.
Yeah, and Coastal Carolina, we were talking about it, and because it was the thought that Noah Kim was going to start for Coastal Carolina, like, oh no, and then Ethan Vasquez announced the starter, and I thought you were chilling, but
Yeah,
Troy, with backup quarterback situation over there, I feel like they're kind of overperforming a little bit these last couple weeks, so that's a team to watch out for in the Sun Belt, I guess. That Coastal Carolina was in the mix to win that Sun Belt division, especially because Old Dominion had lost, and they had the tiebreaker over Old Dominion. Coastal Carolina was in the mix, and then they lose. Now that's their third loss in the Sun Belt. So Troy is a team that could be shattering some more dreams as we go down through the season, and we'll talk about the standings there
they
more.
got two. They got two more games, right? They got a bye week, and then Georgia Southern, who's at the top of the East, and
Yeah,
Louisiana, who's at the top of the West.
love that. The Giant Slayers at Troy. Can't wait for those games. Can't wait for those games. But yeah, overall, we're still up, I guess, as a show, although we are grasping at straws here. It is a slow descent into the pits of Tartarus for me. But we'll get into these games that we previewed. All right, we previewed 8 of them, and we'll start. Well, I guess we'll recap, I guess, the picks. You went 4-4 and straight up winners. Your winners were Ohio State, Ole Miss, Marshall, SMU. Your losers were Illinois, Iowa State, Texas A&M, and Clemson. You were 2-6 ATS. Ohio State, Texas Tech were your winners ATS, and then Illinois, Arkansas, Marshall, Texas A&M, Clemson, Pitt were your losses ATS. So that puts you at 46-35 in picking straight up winners, and then 36-45 ATS. My spot, I went 5-3 picking straight up winners. My winners were Ohio State, Minnesota, Ole Miss, Marshall, South Carolina. My losers were Iowa State, Clemson, and Pitt. I was 4-4 ATS. My winners were Minnesota, Texas Tech, South Carolina, Louisville. My losers were Penn State, Arkansas, Marshall, Pittsburgh. So I'm sitting here 49-32 overall, picking straight up winners, and then 44-37 ATS, which actually is pretty good. In games, I don't anticipate us going positive ATS, over the course of the season, but I did last year, and I'm doing it through 10 weeks this season, so pretty proud of that. But as we're looking at these, there are definitely some misses here. I regret taking Arkansas +7. I know Taylor Green got hurt, but I don't think it would have mattered, really. And then the whole Pitt game, we'll get into that. Those are my regrets, right? In terms of like when I was looking at the board. What about you? And then also, by the way, I took South Carolina, not because I actually thought South Carolina was going to win, but because I was 0 on A&M picks, and I am an A&M fan, so that one hurts to chalk up as a win, as a green on my board. But see, I mean, what do you? I mean, you kind of are hurting this week a little bit, but
Yeah,
this is a
obviously
tough
we talked
week,
about
dude.
the
A lot
best
of
bets at the
favorites
counter.
fell.
It was, and so obviously I talked about the counter. Lost my Illinois ticket, lost my Clemson ticket as well. But outside of that, Iowa State as 14-point dogs took them to cover. They lost straight up and a last-second thriller against Baron Morton and Texas Tech. That was awesome. I thought Marshall outplayed ULM. We'll get into these games more often, but I don't know. I mean, Ole Miss looked fantastic, better than they looked all year, really against good competition.
Yeah,
And yeah, what can I say? Credit to SMU too, man. They're playing really good football. And that game, we're going into potential SMU Miami game in the ACC, and it's going to be pretty awesome.
yeah, and SMU kind of would become a bid stealer if you think about it, because I mean, you could
But we'll
argue,
see
you
what
can't really
happens.
argue that they're, yeah, if they
Because
because if they
their one
lose,
loss
it's
is
hard.
BYU.
Yeah, but their best win, I guess it's Pitt now. It's their best win, and we'll see what Pitt does the rest of the way here. So, and they got to play Clemson still. So, but yeah, let's talk about Ohio State at Penn State. All right, Will Howard wins a ball game. Now, of course, got to credit this defense and the effort that they put in stopping the run, absolutely shutting them down. Something that we've been waiting for this Ohio State defense the last couple of weeks. You were concerned about it. I took Penn State to cover this game. I did take Ohio State to win this game, which sounds kind of stupid and statistically unlikely, but I thought it was going to be a close game.
And it was.
And it was. Yeah, it was a close game. But Ohio State comes out on top. James Franklin, the narrative still continues that he can't win the big one. But I'm not on the fire James Franklin train like some people are. I don't think you are either. Like they've consistently won football games and put themselves in positions. And if you do that enough, at some point, you're going to break that seal. But yeah, Will Howard played well. The defense played awesome. And that's the national championship Ohio State team that I was anticipating seeing coming into the season.
Yeah, and if they went out like they probably should against Washington, Purdue, potentially on the road against Minnesota, Maryland, they're probably going to the playoffs. So you're not going to be firing James Franklin anytime soon. If he's doing that, you played a really close game against Ohio State. The frustrating thing is the if not now, then when sentiment you have against Ohio State and Michigan, and like these big time games, which you continuously come up short in the Big Ten. And I get that. It's frustrating because you got up 10-0 early and the crowd was rocking and you're like, uh-oh, here comes Penn State, and boom, boom, boom. And all of a sudden Ohio State responds, and you got to give them a ton of credit for that. And the reality is they just have more talent than you do. And it's not by a ton, but it is a couple players here and there that make big time plays, right? That interception there by Igbinosun, that was incredible. That was incredible. That's just a really, really talented football player making a play like that. and that changed the outcome of the game. And also, and a lot of people giving Kolnicki a lot of flack, right, for his play call, his play design, more specifically on that 4th and goal there. Yeah, I didn't love it. I'll be honest. I didn't love the play call and the design, but listen, I still think he's not the problem there. I still think he's a pretty good OC, and they'll get it right eventually. You just played a really good defense. You played a really good football team, and you lost. That happens. I know it sucks. Now, that's the thing. It's like ultimately, like I'm not gonna knock how I think of Penn State in terms of like what I think they should be ranked or what they're rated power ranking wise or my perception of how good they are, right? Because of the game, because I saw how close and competitive it was. The frustrating part is that like they were so close, and the frustrating part is that like they couldn't get it done, and they were so close, and it was a miscue here, a mental mistake here, a bad play call here, whatever it may be, that couldn't let them get over the hump. That's the frustrating part, and I get that. If you're Penn State and you're upset, because you have high expectations, yeah, I absolutely get that. But listen, I don't think Penn State's like a serious national championship contender, but I do think they need to if they do improve, which by the way, most college football teams do improve throughout the season. Like that's just kind of, especially the best teams, the best coach teams, but I think they have a good staff. They're going to still get better, right? And it's also like these guys. I know they're older guys, but playing in these big environments, the more and more they play them. Ohio State already was tested. They were already battle tested against Oregon in Eugene. They were ready to play this game and ready to battle that adversity. They came out, they took Penn State's best punch, and they were able to respond and play well and get a win here. Penn State, learning experience for you. And it sucks to have these like, semi-moral victories or like trying to find a glass half full thing for this team consistently against these big time football games. It's like if we can just change this one thing, right? I know I rambled on there, but I am kind of passionate about this because I do like Penn State as a program. I do think that they can do some big things there, even with James Franklin. But I don't know. Does that make sense at all? Am I just
No, I agree. I agree with everything that you just said. Um, Two good football teams played against each other. Someone had to lose, right? If Ryan Day loses, oh my gosh, Ohio State fans are going to go crazy, right? And Penn State fans, it's just like, oh my gosh, same old, can't win the big game. These are just two good football teams, man. And someone was going to be upset either way when they lose. And these are two of the better power rated teams in the entire country. So, I mean, Ohio State went on the road, man. In a tough environment. I know it was a noon game, but it was 1 o'clock game. It's Eastern time, but or no, sorry, it was a
111,000?
noon game. Was a noon game. Yeah, 111,000 people. Will Howard went on the road
Two
and did what he
turn, two
did, man.
penalties, two penalties for Ohio State. That's pretty
Yeah,
damn. Fire Ryan Day. If he lost that game, it would have been a fire Ryan Day. Because let me this right. Penn State goes down on their last possession. Right, how much time was left? It was 5 minutes left. Right, and Ohio State milks the game, which is a pretty impressive drive. But let's say Penn State scores whatever, and they go for two, and they win by one. Right, whatever it may be. There would have been a lot of people coming on Ohio State. And I thought they bet. I was really impressed with them. And I can't believe I heard like from people I respect. Ohio State is not a national championship contender. A serious national championship contender.
ridiculous,
Are you kidding me?
ridiculous,
The only
ridiculous statement.
the team everyone says
Who?
has zero flaw. Everyone's like, oh, Oregon's this perfect football team. Oregon is, they are playing elite football. They're way better than everybody else. They're clearly in their own tier right now in terms of how they're playing, how talented they are. And Ohio State arguably should have probably won that football game in Eugene, Oregon. It crunched a crazy crowd. What are we doing here? What is this? Like Penn State lost against probably the second or third best team in the country, and maybe the first best team in the country. That's your only loss right now, in a tough one. Yeah, but you do have to run the
So
ball better. You do have to run the ball
yeah,
better with
no,
Colton
you do. You do.
at home, Allen and Singleton not being able to get going. Like
After Nebraska did it, Oregon did it.
Oregon did it.
So Indiana, that Ohio State Indiana game is going to be awesome. I
Mhm.
cannot wait for that game. But let's move on because we got to get this going. Stay in the Big Ten. Minnesota, Illinois. I took Illinois to win and cover. I took Minnesota to win and cover. You took Illinois to win and cover. Minnesota sneaks out of this one this was a great football game, guys, by the way. It was clean football. It's only like 58 penalty yards, a lot of third down conversions. Both teams were able to like run the ball pretty effectively. There were some great plays made through the air. Like this was just a good football game. And what it also came down to was a guy who has been lacking all year, who lost you a game earlier in the season, or really, I guess, two games. Dragan Kesic
Yeah,
comes up big with 4 field goals, man. Former Big Ten kicker of the year. That was awesome. Darius Taylor finally really got going on the ground here, and Minnesota's offensive line, I think, played a lot better.
best football they
And
played all
they
year.
best football they played all year, that offensive line. And defensively, you did enough. You forced a fumble earlier in the game that led to a field goal. And then the last possession, Illinois is driving. Luke Altmaier's doing a ton. Yeah, and then they fumble the football, and Minnesota recovers and wins the football game. So this was a really good football game. I'm not down on Illinois for losing Minnesota. I am very impressed with Minnesota, and I do think that Minnesota moving forward can be a problem for a lot of teams. I don't know that they have the talent at all to match up with like an Ohio State, but any other team I think in the Big Ten, aside from that tier one, I think Minnesota is going to give problems moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, their last home game in a couple weeks off of a bye is Penn State. Not to skip over Rutgers next week, Minnesota East over there with Kirk and Athan
Yeah.
and everyone else
Cali
there.
McManus revenge game, or is
Yep.
it a PJ Fleck revenge game on their offensive coordinator over there,
And their DC too. Joe H he's a former Minnesota guy as well. But listen, I
Rasmiak?
harass me. Back to this game here. I took Illinois and I was impressed with them and I thought they ran the ball well, right? They did enough certain times, but also like I thought they would be able to really do more. And Minnesota that's been their problems for a while. And after the bye week against Maryland and then against Illinois, other than that one long run, I was pretty impressed with how stingy they were at times. And that caused Luke Altmaier to maybe, force the issue here and there. You saw some 3-and-outs or some punts that just couldn't get going because they couldn't consistently run the football and sustain drives. It was awesome. It was complimentary football. Like you said, this is a great game. It was a lot more, dare I say, pretty and like good football, quality football than you're used to seeing, I think, between these two football teams. And that's a credit to both coaches here with Brett Bielema and PJ Fleck. And for Minnesota and specifically PJ Fleck, getting a win against Brett Bielema has been a long, long time coming. If you're a Minnesota fan, you remember the days at Wisconsin when he was consistently pounding you guys. You remember the days even at Illinois, his last 10 here. 0-3 against him, I think, is what it's been. Good to get a good win here on the road against a ranked team, you know, in Champaign, Illinois. Yeah, and I think both these teams, if you watch this game on FS1, I mean, you were probably watching Big Noon Kickoff. You were probably watching a couple other games here, but I think you saw two of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten, and I think you had to be really impressed with them. Even though they missed some throws, you saw some open guys, some corner routes. I think Daniel Jackson had 2 touchdowns that he had a step on guys, and Brosmer missed them. But I was still really impressed with the way Brosmer played and getting to his second and third reads, putting the ball in good spots for Taylor to run off the catch, Elijah Spencer on third down. It was really, really impressive, and I've been saying it for a while, and I don't know if Darius Taylor was banged up early in the season. I know he missed that first game because I think a hamstring, but 30 plus touches, like that's gotta be the thing for Darius Taylor. No more splitting time between him and Marcus Major. I know Marcus Major is a talented back in his own right, but you can see a difference Taylor gives you, even when the run is not there. He bounces outside. He makes these big cuts. He runs for a couple tough yards. He is so important to this football team, to this offense, to this running game. Yeah, and for Illinois, I mean, their remaining schedule, you got 3 really winnable games, and obviously Michigan State's playing well, okay, but Rutgers and Northwestern, I guess they're both on the road. But if you're Illinois, like 9 wins is really on the table there, and for that program, that is a huge accomplishment. Something you got to be really ecstatic about. You're already going to a bowl game, which to me is right. That's the threshold, in my opinion. Right, if you are Illinois, it's let's make a bowl game. And their over under was 5.5, and you hit that. It was plus money, by the way. Over under was 5.5, and you hit that, before November even started. Yeah, pretty impressive.
Let's move over to the SEC. Let's talk about Ole Miss at Arkansas. I really don't want to spend too much time with this game because it was exactly what it was, right? That game was exactly what the box score tells you. Ole Miss absolutely put up almost 700 total yards of offense. Jackson Dart threw 6 touchdowns and 500 yards. I mean, Jordan Watkins, 250 yards, 5 touchdowns on 8 receptions. That was pretty embarrassing for Arkansas. And Taylor Green gets hurt. Shocked that he came back in the game, by the way. And then eventually they take him out again. Like, why they decided to do that after they were down like 35-3 or whatever it was at that point, at 35-10. Why they decided to put him back in the game is beyond me. Given that you got a lot of games the rest of the season, you're trying to make a bowl game. But Yeah, Arkansas got smacked. All right, Ole Miss looked really impressive. And moving forward, okay, it's tough where they are right now because they have 2 losses in the SEC, but they're not out of it yet. And Georgia plays a really tough schedule. Texas plays Texas A&M. A&M's got to go to Auburn after having 25 missed tackles, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. And they play against a really good running back in Auburn, a team that's a little bit more down to down consistent than people would probably believe, given their record. So these teams, Tennessee plays a tough schedule. Like
I'd throw
Ole
LSU in
Miss,
there too. LSU plays, in my opinion,
yeah.
4 kind of semi-dangerous teams there. Alabama on the road at Florida. We'll see how their backup looks. Vanderbilt and then Oklahoma with this Jackson Arnold. I know his main, but they look pretty good too.
So, and if Ole Miss, they can do the damage to Georgia themselves, right? Just next weekend, they can beat Georgia. And then the rest of the way, it's Florida, Mississippi State, games that I believe that they can take care of and win. It's so Ole Miss they're not out of it after South Carolina really beat Texas A&M right there. It kind of leaves a lot more stuff open. I think everyone starts to play each other, and Ole Miss, I think the rest of the way, if they beat Georgia, who's not playing well right now, and they get them at home, they got a shot to do stuff. So exciting stuff for Ole Miss. I guess after boosters and donors were probably pissed pouring the money that they did and having 2 losses come out of it, but they're not out of the college football playoff picture at all. Well, I shouldn't say at all, but they're not out of it yet. So, and then let's just move on to the Big 12 right here. We got to keep this moving. Texas Tech at Iowa State. I mean, we talked about it, the ground game being an issue defensively for Iowa State. Taj Brooks did his thing. I think he's been over 100 yards in every single game this season, which is unreal, by the way, an unreal stat. So Taj Brooks, being the menace that he is, Texas Tech doing enough to win a dang ball game against a pretty dang good team. But we talked about some of the vulnerabilities with Iowa State, and they kind of showed up right there, And obviously Texas Tech is probably out of the Big 12 race generally, although it feels like no one is at this point, right? But Iowa State still in the thick of it. They still, I believe, control their own destiny, making it to the Big 12 championship. So they're still in a good spot to do some stuff. But yeah, this was one of the 5 teams that were 10-point or more underdogs that ended up winning straight up. And I believe this was the biggest underdog of the entire weekend that ended up winning.
Yeah, and obviously both these teams fought very hard. Now, the adversity that they came under that fourth quarter was really exciting. Got to give Texas Tech and Iowa State to a ton of credit. Sucks for Iowa State because we know how close they were to running the table and getting a spot in the college football playoffs. But right now, they still have a lot of their goals ahead of them as well. I'm pretty sure that they'll probably own a tiebreaker against Colorado. We'll see what happens there. But this leaves them with 0 margin for error, which is not ideal. As for Texas Tech, like you said, they get a win. They find a way to win, man, because they have not been doing that recently with Baylor and TCU. They go on the road to Ames, Iowa, and get a pretty impressive win. And now they get Colorado and then Oklahoma State and West Virginia. They're looking at potential, 8, 9 win season, potentially probably closer to 8, which is awesome. And that's what Jordan McGuire needs to be to continue to build this program, continue to recruit well, continue to develop year over year. It's going to be up and down. It is. It's a hard place to win at, but McGuire's doing great things there. And I was happy to see Baron Moore come back healthy. I know he had some bad throws. I know he wasn't super efficient at just above 50% completion percentage, but him and Josh Kelly are pretty dangerous there. When they're playing well, when Taj Brooks run the football well, and their defense isn't getting absolutely shredded, it's a dangerous football team. And they proved that this weekend.
Got to keep this moving. So let's go to the Sun Belt. UL Monroe at Marshall. Marshall finds a way. Lou Monroe keeps it close. We both took Marshall to cover the spread and win. They did win, did not cover the spread there. Lou Monroe, I mean, once again, just continue to be a dangerous team in the Sun Belt for some of these teams at the top. Marshall, with the loss of Old Dominion, I believe Marshall still plays Old Dominion later in the season. If they win that game, Georgia Southern, drops another one. I don't know if Georgia Southern and Marshall have played yet.
Yeah, Georgia
I
Southern
want
beat
to.
Marshall.
Okay, so they do have the tiebreaker on that one. So I
I
guess
think
Marshall
that was
still
when
needs to keep winning.
Marshall blew a big time lead in that game. That was
Oh
another one.
yeah,
Georgia
that was a
Southern
big
came
time
back
one. And
21
then Georgia
points in the fourth
Southern
quarter.
came back against South Alabama too this past week.
Fighting JC Frenches over there.
Fighting JC French's, Clay Helton putting in work over there. But yeah, I mean Marshall still finding a way to win. Okay, this team's going bowling. Lou Monroe's team that's probably going bowling as well. The Sun Belt, dude, last year where they have 13 teams to go bowling, and
I think it was
yeah, so Lou
11.
Monroe and
Yeah.
Marshall, I think find one more win. I mean, they're no, I think it was legitimately like 13 teams. Like, I legitimately
I
think it
was like
was like
everyone but one or two or something like that.
yeah, I think the only team that didn't go bowling last year, well, I think it was Southern Miss and Lou Monroe were the only two that didn't go bowling. So maybe it was 12. Yeah, that's crazy,
Yeah,
man.
because I remember the whole East side, they all went bowling, the whole division.
Yeah. And you talked about, two impact players in this game. You talked about Turner at the running back spot who, maybe didn't have his best game. But then you talked about Hardy over there from Monroe. 25 carries, 207 yards, and a touchdown. That's enough to win you a game right there. But, I mean, Marshall was kind of in control with about 3 minutes left to go in the game, but they still put up a fight, man. They still put up a fight. And so, yeah, I mean, good job by Marshall, the Thundering Herd over there. Team that I think is kind of outperforming my expectations. Obviously, Lou Monroe is outperforming my expectations, but Sunbelt last year, I kind of got burned with them by them, kind of tailing them in a lot of games in the bowl season. But I'm gonna have a tougher time, riding the Sunbelt when it comes bowl season this year around. But man, they got some frisky teams over there that like winning ball games. So it's competitive. It is a competitive conference. That East division is going to be awesome to watch and see what kind of tiebreakers. I know Georgia Southern's kind of like in the lead right now, but there are definitely some weird tiebreakers like who beat who is crazy over there.
I,
Because
I
Old Dominion, I mean James Madison, I mean, and this bunch of them still play each other too. It's not over.
Oh, and I think it's more about like the big upsets you've seen, and also I think everyone expects Georgia Southern to lose another game, so that's why we're all like, okay, the East Division is going to be crazy. Louisiana's looking very dominant right there in the West, but obviously anything can happen there. I think pretty sure they play Arkansas State this week, don't they? Yeah, it's in Louisiana, but still they've been playing better in the Sun Belt as well. As for this game, though, yeah, like you said, Hardy's a monster for ULM. I love to see him get going there. That big 80-yard run was huge, but they couldn't quite finish it out. I get that. Marshall, I was impressed with them. Braxton does some good things, not super efficient, but he does some good things. They didn't get Turner going, and they still found a way to win. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Texas A&M at South Carolina. Holy cow! 500 total yards of offense, 25 missed tackles. Lenore Sellers played his best game that we have ever seen him play. Both on the ground, him and Raheem Sanders were unbelievable. And he just found ways to, like, the offensive line did not play well for South Carolina. They did not. But Lenore Sellers made plays with his legs and his massive size. He got out of the pocket, broke tackles. I think he broke himself. I think he broke 4 tackles from Shamar Stewart. 4 for Shamar Stewart, who weighs like 260, 270 pounds. Like, that's crazy. All right, that's crazy. That dude is a strong man. And from the Texas A&M side, you know, people were talking about throwing Connor, do this, do that with the quarterback spot. I don't think offense was your problem, right? You didn't convert on 2 4th downs, which is really big. That ended up costing you big time, but it wasn't necessarily terrible on the offense side of the football. It was defensively giving up 500 total yards of offense was quite frankly pretty embarrassing for a team first place in the SEC. And of course, Texas A&M, you lose to a game like South Carolina, but they still control their own destiny in the SEC. Because Georgia and Tennessee play each other, right? So one of them will lose a game. You hold the tiebreaker over LSU, and then you play Texas. So you literally control your own destiny still in the SEC.
But they had to play a lot better than they did today. And obviously, South
Yep.
Carolina we talked about them since week 2, right? When they just dismantled Kentucky, that they're going to give every team problems, no matter what the score is going to be, no matter what it is. Like, they're going to be a nightmare for a lot of teams. And it turned out to be they finally got someone, and they got A&M. They were the unlucky straw in Columbia down there. Listen, yeah, Sellers was awesome. It was great to see the Raheem Sanders, obviously not for A&M fans, but great to see Raheem Sanders look healthy and look like he has looked in the SEC when he has been playing really good football. When he's healthy, he gives them an added dimension that they can just feed him the rock, and no matter what's there, he can get them 3 or 4 yards and obviously break ones off for some chunk plays. Simon was awesome, the tight end. Their defense really got after. That was the frustrating part for A&M was the turnovers, right? And then also the 4th down conversion. You mentioned that, like, for a team that ran the ball so well a week ago, the O line was been playing so well. not being able to get a yard or sometimes half a yard when you needed to, that led to 10 points for South Carolina in a game where it was much closer than the score indicated, right? Obviously, it got ugly late because you were trying to press and score touchdowns, whatever it may be, and not punt, and you threw the interceptions and the pick six, whatever it was, right? Or not the pick six, but the interception. That's frustrating. That's those small margins. That's just really hard in year one as your coach. I still think I feel really high on Texas A&M going long term. I still feel really high on what Shane Beamer can do at Carolina. This team is really dangerous as well. Obviously, the Le'Veon Moss injury, super, super sad, super tough. It looked like a pretty scary injury. Obviously, I had the whole A&M sideline felt super bad for him, was going in the 10th and all that stuff. But he is a monster. He is really, really good. And when you are struggling potentially to move the football down the field at times, like he's a back which you can give the ball and get 3-4 yards whenever you want, similar to how Raheem Sanders was for South Carolina and breaking tackles and forcing missed tackles. Le'Veon Moss has done that all year for you. And now, what, the leading or second leading rusher in the SEC, he's out for the year now potentially. And at least what it looked like there, it's obviously super, super sad for A&M. By the way, where's Noah Thomas, too? That was the first. I mean, there were some times I think I overthrown the ball and you missed him a couple times, but that to me has been the story I think of A&M's offense this year. Obviously, Wigman and the revolving door it's been at quarterback has been a problem, but being able to have a number one receiver that you can just rely upon, which we thought Noah Thomas would be, and we've heard all these practice reports and all these things, that's the frustrating part. And your two transfers from the Sun Belt and the Conference USA and Cyrus Allen and Jabray Barber, like these are the guys that are making plays for you. And Noah Thomas and Ja'Day Walker and these guys, they're kind of taking a back seat, which is I get it. And I know Barber and Allen are very good, very talented, but will be nice to see a little bit more help from your big physical wide receivers.
Louisville takes it to Clemson. 33-21 is your final score. The Clemson Tigers are asked to throw the ball 56 times. They're asked to convert on third down 23 times. This is a crazy game. I mean, it could be summarized by, Jeff Brom in some of these big games, and you saw it last year with Notre Dame, a couple explosive plays in the run game can do wonders for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't seem like if you kind of box score snipe, this doesn't seem like a dominant win, right, for Louisville, but they controlled a lot of that football game. They really did, especially in those first 3 quarters. It was disappointing as a guy who holds a Clemson ACC ticket, as a guy that took Clemson, a guy that put him on my best bets at the counter this week. It was disappointing. I thought I would get more from Klubnik in this passing offense, more consistency with Moore healthy, with Wesco healthy, right, with Williams there, and bringing us all the tight end. You had, I've thought, a lot of weapons to be able to use and attack this Louisville defense, which we saw Miami a couple weeks ago really give a ton of problems. And yet here we are, and Clemson had 7 points through 3 quarters, and it was same old, same old. It's been the same story for a couple years now where they're playing these good teams and they can't keep up with their offenses. But honestly, a ton of credit goes to Jeff Brom, like you said, a ton of credit to his Louisville team. Tyler Shuck did enough, right? He just did enough. They really relied upon that true freshman, Isaac Brown, who is turning into a monster, not just in the ACC, but also throughout the rest of the country. He is really, really good. And also, yeah, that's if you're Clemson, right, on the same night SMU dominates Pitt, right, same night Miami, looked bad, slept walk through 3 quarters, and then obviously covered against Duke, right? This is a game that you feel like at home you have to have, especially with that ugly loss against Georgia on your schedule where you're not really in position to be an at-large 10-2 team. You really aren't, especially with now a double-digit loss to an unranked team at home as a double-digit favorite. Not ideal.
Yeah, not ideal at all. And they need SMU to lose, right? And they need, obviously, Miami. One of those two to lose. I don't know how the tiebreaker situation works out, but it might be a situation where SMU and Miami both have that tiebreaker over Clemson, because I don't know how many conference wins. We've talked about this before in the ACC. I don't know how many of the teams that Clemson has beat. I don't know what their strength of record is, and some of those common opponents. SMU and Clemson both have played against Pitt. at that point, and if they both win, that's not part of it. Like you'd have to walk down the line. So it seems like Clemson needs a bit of help here. And like you said, they're not to reiterate exactly what you said, but yeah, they're not in. If they unless they win and probably win the conference. And even if they don't make the conference championship, there's just no way you can put a 10-2 team that has this bad of a loss on their resume, as well as a blowout loss to, yes, another likely college football playoff team. But we don't even know that Georgia's going to make the college football playoffs. We don't know. They still have a tough schedule ahead of them and some challenges that they got to face. So I guess, yeah, Clemson, with this loss, they're not in the driver's seat. And this was the big win that Jeff Brohm was going to get this year. This was the big one. We've been waiting on it. A lot of one-possession games. Reason that I took Louisville to cover the spread. Reason I put them in the Dirty Dogs is because Jeff Brohm's playing a lot of close football games this year. And he finds ways to win some big ones sometimes. And, yeah, and I don't think Louisville's had a bye for, 6 or 7 straight weeks either. They're impressive performance from the Cardinals here, finding a way to win. Tyler Shuck didn't even need to be a hero. I thought he might need to be. Phil Maffa ran for 100. If you were telling me, oh, yeah, Phil Maffa ran for 170 yards, I would have been like, oh, so how badly did Clemson beat him? Not the case at all. Not the case at all.
Can I ask you this here? Is this more about, Louisville maybe turning a corner, finding an identity offensively and defensively for that matter too? Or is this more about Clemson, and we just they beat up on a lot of bad football teams in the ACC, and that's kind of inflated their stats? Or is it more Louisville side? And to counter that too, or I guess to add on to that, depending on your answer, how concerned are you now for Clemson? Like I kind of just said, 10-2, but they still have 2 road games in the ACC against Virginia Tech and Pitt, and they also finished the year with South Carolina, who just gave Texas A&M the business. Right? What's your concern level? And then 2, is this your takeaways from Louisville and Clemson side? Is this because you were on Louisville, right? You took Louisville, you were on their Dirty Dogs. Is this? Yeah, I guess explain to me in terms of your outlook for the rest of this. What's your explanation of this game?
Well, I look at this and I'm like, Clemson could have won this game, right? Louisville's a good football team. Clemson could have won this game, right? 2 things are true. Now, yeah, it is concerning that they haven't played a ton of great football teams. I don't know that they got out physical, but there definitely were some flaws that were exposed in terms of their, run defense and maybe susceptibility to giving up some explosive plays there, and also special teams didn't look great. That was an issue. Yeah, I'm not super worried about Clemson, in terms of out. If they win 10 games, that's a good season, I mean, maybe not
Do
what
you
your
still? Do you think they
goals.
can? You think they still will win 10 games? That's my question here. Because I mean, I know Virginia Tech and Pitt both lost last week, but
I,
the 2
I, I
road
think
games.
Clemson will still win 10 games.
Okay.
I think, well, Virginia Tech, I know that they didn't have. Well,
Drones.
actually, let me tell you this. That South Carolina game is easily the toughest game, I think, that they have left on their schedule. So I think they definitely get the 9 wins. I think 10 wins is, it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. I like this Louisville team. Like I told you, I mean, I had them in this spot, in the Dirty Dogs, but also I think I do think that there's Clemson is good, but also there's some issues.
Yeah. It's interesting too because if you told me Clemson, you have Georgia on your schedule, right? Which at this point, with what Clemson is, the program as a team right now, that's not that it's penciled in as a loss, but I mean, they were double digit. They were 14-point dogs in that game, right? So it's not like you're expecting to win that game. So to say that you went 10-1 the rest of the way, right? I think it's unfortunately it's kind of a win right now for Clemson. I know the program has had high expectations in the last decade, right? I get that. You've seen national championships, you've seen first round quarterbacks. I get that. But to be honest, 10-1, if you finish the rest of the season that way, yes, is it a missed opportunity because you absolutely could have been sitting in the ACC championship game? Absolutely, but it's also 10 wins is going to keep Dabo Swinney's job. It really is, and I don't know, it's going to make him drastically change the way he feels about himself, about his program, and what he thinks is his virtues of Clemson's football program.
And generally, you're now that they're split up in, they no longer have divisions. one conference loss can sometimes get you in the conference championship in the ACC. It just happens to be that SMU maybe got the easiest schedule in the entire ACC, aside from possibly Virginia Tech, but Virginia Tech even has to play Clemson, and Miami also kind of got the benefit of that as well. So it's interesting, and they're out of conference, right? It was obviously unequal because Clemson has to play Georgia and South Carolina. So I think there's an unequal schedule right there. I do think Clemson. I think Clemson would give Miami problems. I think Clemson and Miami would be a great matchup right there. I think it would be very competitive. I think Clemson would beat SMU. That's my opinion. Even though SMU is a very hot football team right now, I just felt very. I was amused by this spot, and Jeff Brom is, like we've talked about, one of the best coaches in the entire country. So it's
Yeah.
like it's not a bummer to lose Jeff Brom. Ryan Day has lost to Jeff Brom. You know, I mean, like, come on.
PJ Fleck has lost to Jeff
PJ Fleck has lost to Jeff Brom. Elite
Market.
coaches.
Yeah, you've a lot of the ACC, and they're going to come to know that too. And I think they already do. I think he's got a lot of respect, and we want to push that narrative because yeah, he's fantastic. But also that team, I like Louisville. And their schedule looking forward. You got Stanford right after a much needed bye week, like you said. They played a lot of football recently. Bye week, and then they finished on the road across the country against Stanford. Pitt, who looked very vulnerable this past weekend, and on the road to your rival Kentucky, who is again not going bowling. So it's definitely there for him to finish with 9 wins, and that again would be a super successful season, I think, for Jeff Brom.
Let's take in the ACC. Pitt goes to SMU, and Pitt just gets pounded. I mean, SMU finding ways to just put points on the board, man. Even though you didn't play your cleanest football game by far, but uh, yeah, you find a way to put 48 points on the board and get up early in a big way. A lot of like Pitt's damage that they did on the offensive side of the ball was kind of meaningless.
Yeah,
And SMU is now in the driver's seat to make the ACC championship in their first year in the ACC, which is pretty impressive after, battling through quarterback controversy, losing to BYU on the road early in the season, which turned out to be a really good loss.
losing
And
RJ
now
Maryland.
losing RJ Maryland, I've given their defense. I haven't given their defense, I feel like, nearly enough credit to what they actually probably deserve this season. I think throughout the season, I've been skeptical because they have been very dependent on turnovers, and this was the case last year. But guess what? They're a darn good football team. Their offensive line is exceeding any expectations that I had for them, given how many transfers they had come out of there, right? That went to different Power 5 schools. Like, you lost a lot of talent on that offensive line. And yet, here we are. Here we are. You tell me Jalen Knight and LJ Johnson are non-factors in this offense? You don't have RJ Maryland? Preston Stone got beat out by Kevin Jennings? If you were to tell me those things, I'd have been like, oh, SMU, there's no way they hit their over 8.5 win total. But yeah, here we are. They're a good football team and in the driver's seat to make the ACC championship.
For sure. And I don't want to take anything away from them at all. I do think Pitt, in terms of 7-0 teams at this point in the season, maybe towards the bottom, of that. And that's no surprise there, but they've done an incredible job. They've given a lot of teams a lot of problems in the ACC specifically too. And you got to give them, SMU, a ton of credit for jumping on them early at home. We saw what Pitt did in that first half at Syracuse a couple weeks ago, right? Or I guess 10 days ago from now. And that Thursday night, they really got after Cal McCord and Syracuse, and SMU did the same thing here. They jumped on Pitt. Now, yes, Pitt had some missed opportunities, missed field goal, right? The fumble, but they couldn't get anything going really to sustain drives and finish drives. And SMU, 4 touchdowns, boom. And off those turnovers, off those miscues, 1 play touchdown, the Brashad Smith big run, right? After the fumble, 7 play, 46-yard touchdown, and you just put the game away. It was 28-3 at half. And from there, you can't do much. I guess 31-3 with the field goal at the end there, which again,
Right.
impressive. But yeah, listen, like you said, we talked about SMU, Clemson, and Miami in terms of probably the top. And I guess you throw Louisville in there now in terms of the top of the ACC. But damn, man, I've been really impressed with SMU. I do think they have some games on their schedule that are quote unquote, easier, but I also understand that I don't just trust them to go out there and automatically win them. I have been impressed with the way they have won and handled themselves in games where they should win, right? Florida State, Stanford, right? This game here, Pitt, they were favored by like I think over a touchdown. And even games where you don't have your fastball, you have 6 turnovers against Duke and you get a win here. It's really exciting for Rhett Lashley and this offense and this team in general, right? It's for the Mustangs, man. It's been a while since they've been good in football. I haven't really seen it in my lifetime. I've only heard and seen the documentaries and all that good stuff. But if they're being explosive, right, you've got 71-yard touchdown, 80-yard touchdown, like these big time plays, that's when they're really, really dangerous and they just jump on you. And yeah, SMU brought their A game and Pitt couldn't counter, and that's fine. This has still been a super successful season for for Pitt.
I agree. 7-1. That's crazy at this point. That's crazy. Eli Holstein, playing the way we've talked about it before. Eli Holstein. I picked Pitt to actually win and cover this game. I thought that they might be able to do some damage through the air, but the damage that they did, it just came a little late, right? I mean, a 24-point second quarter from SMU, and Nate Yarnell ended up coming in, and
yeah,
he looked good. I think if Pitt moving forward, like if they have either of those guys at quarterback, I think they can like still win football games. Now the issue is you do play Clemson. It's kind of a tough game. You don't love that. Louisville, it's not an easy schedule the remainder of the way. But if you finish the season and you go, now it's always tough to end the season on a 5-game schneid. But like going 7-5, if you were to tell me preseason Pitt went 7-5, I would be insanely impressed. And we know that Cade Bell, that offensive coordinator hiring that they had, is working out, and they did a really nice job with that in the offseason. Pat Narduzzi maybe flopped on the offensive coordinator hire after he basically forced Marcus Satterfield out of there, and now look at them go. So both these teams have a lot of high upside moving forward as programs, I think. That's going to do it for our Week 10 recap. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you like the content, like the video, simple rule we have here, I would urge you to consider subscribing, all right? Because we do have coverage the rest of the way, the rest of the season. And then once we get in the bowl season, I feel like our bowl season coverage is second to none. All right. We love bowl season. We'll make sure there is a bowl pool that will be coming out soon. Once those bowl games are decided, we'll make sure that you guys are on top of that. And you can join for free. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So we actually cover the cost of it. So you're welcome. But all that means you got to do is subscribe. So we thank you guys so much for all of the stuff and the support you've given us as we head forward into Week 11 next week. CD, anything for us on the way out?
No, like you said, hope you enjoyed it. Look out for our previews coming up soon. Also, keep an eye on those college football playoff rankings. They aren't set in stone, but they do. It's just fun. It's been fun. We're waiting for it. It's early November. A lot of stuff going on here. We got Maction. We got Maction this week, which is awesome. So keep an eye on Twitter just in case we got some best bets coming out here and there, like Matthew always says. So hope you guys enjoyed.
We'll see y'all in the next one.